Today I have a very special guest, a surprise guest. This is actually my father. So my dad is on the show this week, and we'll be having some interesting conversations. We'll see where the conversation goes, but we'll definitely sift through some things here, and hopefully you guys can also gain value from it. Listen to this conversation. Here on the Bolden Movement Podcast, the purpose is to get you guys thinking in ways that are maybe outside of the ways you were thinking before when it comes to your health and your fitness and whatever is going on in your life. I don't want to separate you taking care of your body and your wellness. So without further more ado, we're going to get into this episode. First topic, right? So first topic I typically get into with my men is men's mental health. So when it comes to men's mental health, do you have a routine in the morning or per se when you get up?
Well, I tell you, it's probably a little more complicated than that. Generally, I'm probably a little more spiritual than a lot of people think I am.
What do you mean by that?
Usually the first thing I do in the morning when I open my eyes is thank God for waking me up for another day. And go from there. I usually try to wake up in a positive mood, knowing that everything is basically like a clean slate every morning, is the way I look at it, unless there's some overarching problem going on. But either way, I try to wake up in a fresh mood, in a different way of, just be ready for the day, but go at it in a more positive feel. I want to get the best out of the day.
Right.
And that's usually how I try to wake up and approach everything, and get up, do the normal things everyone does in the shower and the back out, and get ready to go somewhere or work on the computer. That's usually how it goes, and maybe talk to a few people on the phone or whatever you're in person.
So what brings you to the point where you wake up and you thank God for waking you up that day? Like, what makes you think that the first thing that you should do when you wake up is be peaceful and thank God? Like, how do you get to that point? Because not everybody wakes up that way, right?
No, I know they don't. And I guess it's, just comes with age and experience that you start off in a bad mood, the day never gets any better. That's
right.
That's what I've found. You start in a good mood. Sometimes your good mood rubs off on other people and brings them to a better mood, and it usually brings to a more positive day at the end of the day. So
definitely does. So if you're having a great day, and this happens to me a lot because I understand the energy I bring, and I understand it's not for everybody. So me being upbeat and pushing people to go towards their goals and push that weight and get that's not for everybody. That irritates some people, right? And I get that. And then, that's fine. I get that. So like, what do you do when you have that person that's trying to like ruffle your feathers or kind of dry hate? I love the word dry hate this week because dry hate was used in a way that people won't directly hate on you, but they'll tell people, oh, I want to work with him because X, Y, Z, or you have to watch out for this and that. And they taint things in a way. And that happens to me. And I'm not a negative person. So I know it can happen to anybody. So like, what do you do when somebody's trying to like, clearly they're trying to like get you to break character? Like, what do you do with those people?
Well, I say more recently, I don't really run to that as much as probably in a more office setting kind of work environment. Excuse me on that. And that's usually where you'd run into those kind of people. But the biggest thing is bringing your integrity to anything that you're doing so that when these people are spreading or trying to spread bad information about you, it doesn't stick, because then no one would ever believe those type of things that you would do or have done or whatever.
Right.
Because they know you, they know how you are. So eventually it just flags off to that person. Everyone becomes known as that person is the hater. So,
right.
Then that kind of diminishes their standing in everyone else's eyes. But I try not to let it bother me on a lot of occasions. If I feel like there's someone doing something, I identify them and try to figure out what they're up to before they get there. That's usually how I do it. But at the same time, I make sure I'm knocking my part of what I have to do out of the park, that no matter what anyone says, that those who have any power over me being there or doing something, they don't believe whatever's going on and they need me because I'm invaluable to them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's definitely a great answer. So keep your integrity, make sure that, you're invaluable to the person you're providing service for. So that way, no matter the bad stuff that people try to throw at you, it's not, it's not relevant.
Yes.
It's not going to stick. It's clearly hate, and I deal with this from people I don't expect. That's why I bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
But with this day and age, I almost have to play the fool. So if I play the fool in some situations, I can get more insight and intel.
Right.
See, if I play the fool longer than you think, and you think you're getting over on me, I'm getting intel on how you really think. When I let you continue to talk, I let you talk about other people, and I hear how you talk about them, and I just let you keep going. And you think that you're convincing me of something because I'm just sitting there, listening. But what I'm taking from those conversations from those people who are, who are clearly not with me is it's just that insight piece. I mean, that's all I can really take from that type of situation, like the gossip and the hate and the stuff like that. Like if that's what is in your heart and that's how you want to carry it, I understand, but that's not where I'm at. So it's like I have to cut ties and create boundaries very hard and very cut and dry because it's like I'm starting a new year. Like we just started 2025. I know it's later in the year by the time they see this, but it's like it's a great time to cut these things, and
because they're going to talk about you the same way.
It's going to be the same thing.
It's going to be the same thing no matter which direction it goes. Sorry about the mic.
You good?
Yeah, and that's basically what you really have to do. You really have to cut off negative energy before it sucks your energy out of you, and to put you in places that you don't want to be.
It's definitely draining. I mean, do you think it's worth playing the fool, or do I cut them off? Like, do I wait to see what they're actually going to say, or do I cut all ties? Because it's like I'm kind of back and forth.
It kind of depends on what the situation is. My natural tendency is just not say anything and just listen. And then from there, I kind of conclude what I need to do. If it's a direct cutoff, do I need to confront somebody or something else altogether? But like I said, I think being a positive person is more infectious a lot of times.
Yes, I agree.
It's hard for people to really, unless they're really just little demons inside, to persist in doing those kind of things to people. Sometimes you just have to. Some people, as they say, some people are brought to you as a lesson into your life, and some people are brought to you as a friend or something else. So there's a lot of lessons out there for us to learn, I find. So.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a lot. It's definitely a lot. So like when it comes to, because you mentioned like wisdom is why like you get to where you are now when you wake up, when you have the peace and you pray and stuff, like for the wisdom piece for someone, in my position, say someone who is, just kind of starting really on this focus journey. I mean, I've been in fitness, but I'm really focused in now. Mm-hmm. What kind of advice would you give someone like me, whether it's the people I'm around, whether it's what I focus on, whether it's what I do and don't listen to? Like, what would your guidance be?
Well, the biggest thing is knowing where you need to go. And because a lot of people try to knock you off your plan, and you need to know exactly what you need to do to get to where you want to go. And that will kind of tell you where to put the barriers up against people, where to let them down, let them in, push them out. But you really just have to have a focused goal in mind to be able to apply the different feelings of how people are seeing you, because there are a lot more people out here who do not like you for no more, just because they're jealous perhaps of seeing you accomplishing something and you're doing it in a way that's not conventional. You're not doing the 9 to 5 in the cubicle thing to get where you want to go. And there are a lot of people who are jealous of that. They wish they could do it, but they don't have the nerve or the gumption to even try a lot of times. And I find sometimes that's where some hate comes from people who are just jealous. And then eventually those same people are the ones begging you to help you or get a job or something, that may or may not be on the up and up. They may be wanting to get in to see how they can mess you from the inside.
Right. So, we don't want that.
Or figure out how they can do their own thing and still kind of mess you up at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's you really have to go with your gut on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And
this comes with a lot of like business stuff, because it's like you meet so many people and everybody's the man. Everybody has the money. Everybody is ready to sign the contract. Everybody's this and that. So it's like, I just ask, because it's like, I feel like your gut is more telling sometimes than the credentials on paper.
Yes.
I
tell you, every time I've gone against my gut, it didn't go very well. It may not have been immediate, but in the long run, probably didn't. And there's always something you think about every day that, if I'd only did that.
Right.
But
I mean, what do you think that is, though? Like, because you said in the beginning, you're more spiritual than people think. So we just talked about our gut being our telltale sign, which is very important and prevalent. What do you think that is? What is that in you? Do you think that's...
In my case, I think it's the Spirit of God looking down and try to guide me, and I always pray for guidance, and I think those gut feelings are part of that guidance. And, memories and situations, or I always find a lot of times before I engage into something, a lot of information seems to pop up randomly that presents itself that's related to what I'm about to do or thinking about doing. And I'm like, that can't be an accident, because it happens too often, especially when I get to a place where there's a hard thought process needs to happen, or sometimes, you just get to something where, is this too big for me to do? And then you just feel like, it may be big, but you can do it. And just push on through and get it done.
All right. I like it. And, speaking of big, this is actually big for me to do the podcast, to be sitting here talking with you, my dad, and having this conversation. So you want to talk about jumping, and going for things outside your comfort zone. I'm doing that all the time. And I encourage other people to do it.
Right.
So, we talk about like gut feelings and wisdom and stuff like that. And earlier in the season, we talk about like how people came up, nature versus nurture, and things like that. And there's a lot of different perspectives, from man to woman, from Black to white to Mexican to... It's different perspectives on what do you take from your childhood. And, everybody has that little kid in them. Everybody does, right? Everybody has that. And that little kid in you is what I feel like it's an art to learn how to treat that inner child in you, because, you can't be mean to the inner kid in you. There's something that's trying to be expressed, but how do you express it appropriately? See, I feel like as a man, especially as time goes on, 21, 22, 23, you look back and reflect on your life, but you have these pressures to hurry up and provide and make money and, be masculine and, be a certain way. And it's like you have this little child in you that's never addressed, not in the way that most women may, because they're more emotionally maybe vulnerable, or maybe even more emotionally intelligent than most men. And that's when I talked about earlier in the season, masculine and feminine energy. And I was humbled when I talked to my friend Ben about it, because I was upset because I felt like masculinity was looked at as a bad thing, and feminine energy was only for women. And I learned that, just calling something beautiful is feminine energy. The way it was explained to me was making a diamond, that rough process, the pressure, the heat, that's the masculine energy of making it. But the product is a diamond. The diamond is beautiful, and that's masculine energy. See, I didn't realize how intertwined the two things were, because society makes that construct very different. It makes it very like separate. Like a man is just rah, 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 right? And then you hurry up and you get him out the house because you're better off without him anyway. But the thing is, when men are pushed out the house and you talk to these people later in life, these kids later in life, as they're adults, the first thing they talk about when you ask about their childhood is my dad this, my dad that. I mean, you can look at a documentary tonight and just look at people talk about their life story. They talk about their parents first, and it's usually their father, because a father has always been a pivotal point. And it doesn't mean that every situation is necessarily the same, but it's the lessons you can put in place. Some fathers come late, some are stepfathers, some come, some are there right on time. It may be your kid, you're there the whole time. You may be a couple years late, you may be 20 years late. It doesn't matter how late you are as a father, you're still a pivotal piece. And that's what I feel like the disconnect is. And this honestly gets me upset, because so many people want to hurry up and cut that tie with their father and with that pivotal piece. And when you actually understand how intertwined that feminine and masculine energy is, and how important that is to understand your mother and your father, to have more perspective on what was going on when you were younger, when you were growing up. See, people don't have perspective on what was going on necessarily on the other side. They're just thinking of their side, what happened to me. This is what I saw. This is what I felt. Yeah, but take a step back and look at the situation as a whole. And once you see that, take another step back. And then once you see that, take another step back. And you'll keep getting more insight. And it took me to lose everything to figure this out. So once I was stripped of everything and everything is lost, I had to think about who I was. See, people don't think about who they are until they're getting ready to die or they're locked up, and there's no options. You can't go anywhere. You can't leave the bed. You can't leave the cell. There's no distractions. So you have to think about who you are. And it's going to start with flooding. Your mind's going to flood with anxiety. Yes. This happens to everybody when they try to meditate. Their mind floods and floods and floods. But if you sit still a little bit longer, just think about the insight. You talked about having that godly kind of intuition in you, and it's in you, and you can hear it if you sit still long enough.
Gotta be
let the noise go away. Like that's not woo woo. Like I really go meditate. Like I asked somebody I meditate with, and she showed me like really how to get there, and you get insight in ways that may not make sense right away. But they're huge in the long run. And it's like I asked a long time for insight on what to do and what my path was and who was for me and who wasn't. And when I saw it, I'm like, what? That can't be right. I thought they were my friends. And I thought I was supposed to go this way. I thought I was supposed to do that. But when I had to stop fighting that to actually, to change, because before I lost everything, it was hard to get through to me. You can't tell me I'm doing anything wrong. You can't tell me I'm not the man. You can't tell me anything right now, because I was doing what I wanted to do, and I felt like I was doing it with my own rules at my own accord. But expense.
And that's usually where everything goes off the rails.
Yes. So the expense, I mixed in, a lot of alcohol.
I'm here to tell you, I've done the same things and on some level. And it was not pretty.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then I was, I'm getting kicked out of bars and birthday parties and this and that. And, you can't tell me anything. I don't care. It doesn't matter, because this happened since I was in school, because the way, honestly, like we grew up, If it wasn't you who was talking to me as a man, I didn't care.
Mm. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think
That's how it was.
dynamic with the parents is very, it's more complicated than people realize. That the different energies you're getting from your mother and your father,
yes,
whether they're closer or far away or just visiting or what have you, it makes a difference. And I know in my case, my father was always working, so actually, I really only got to see him late at night, just in time for him to tell me to go to bed.
right.
As he was a teacher, and then before that, he was worked with the telephone company, and then he was in college, and all these other things, and basically it was me and my mother just kind of holding it down for about 4 years before I had any other siblings. I don't know, but I one thing I've noticed in my observations over the years is, and I firmly believe everyone is born with a personality they're going to have,
Right.
and I've seen that. Oops. And it's just a matter of how that develops, whether or not your parents recognize it or not, to help it develop in a good way or not. Sometimes, a lot of times you find people who are so wrapped up in themselves, they don't take care of their children, or
it's like a disconnect.
Yeah.
It's like a disconnect that happens because it's just like, I don't mean to cut you off, but getting older, I know that there's more stresses in an adult's life than kids realize.
Yes.
And then when that swirls, it kind of is like you can kind of get in the daze, I feel like, or trance, or kind of get in the shell of yourself because you still have to go through all the motions regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that.
Recalled, I used to say, enjoy your childhood as long as you can.
Yeah. I mean,
you remember that,
I used
right?
to hear that. You understand what that means.
The beginning of that.
Yeah. It's definitely tougher than people realize. That's why I say perspective and stepping back and looking at it, bird's eye view, is always beneficial. And, this year, a question that I was asked that I can't forget is, who was your role model? Everybody gets asked this in school and stuff. It's just like, people want me to pick somebody like a superhero, like LeBron James and stuff like that. I was like,
right.
Nah, I think the people that were tougher on me were the best teachers. Because it's just like, the people were like, damn, like, why were you that way? Like, why do you keep telling me to do this and that and that? Those are the lessons you actually remember. It's not the ones that are always hugging you and kissing you and calling. They didn't teach you anything the way that the ones that were very strict. See, I remember both lessons, from the people that were nice and coddling and from the people that were strict. But there's lessons to take from both. So when you ask for a role model, I think there's like this closed-minded view that it's just like superhero. No, the superhero and the villain both have things we can take from, right? So now as that inner kid in me, and when I was younger, I would say up until I was 5 or 6, in my head, I feel like nobody could see me.
Really?
I don't know if people knew this.
No.
I assumed that adults, my mom, my dad, my sisters and stuff, I assumed that they could not see me at certain times. It was confusing me because, for real, because some things I would stand there and be in the middle of, I was like, they must not be able to see me. I don't think they can see me or hear me. And that was something that kind of stuck with me. So that had an effect later. So, and I don't know this until later on, but when I'm high school, probably starting high school and going through high school, I'm alone again. My sisters are in college, you're gone, and mom is working when I come home from school.
Right.
I'm abandoned again when I'm 18, and that's what I feel like. That's not what happened. I'm home, but this is what I feel like internally, and now it's just like I'm in this dangerous search for love at this point, for that void, or what I think love looks like, or what I think companionship is, or friends, right? And everybody's going. Like my sisters are in college. I'm the youngest. You're going, mom's working, and it's just like, damn, nobody thought I was gonna be sitting here like needing a little bit of guidance. I'm a teenager. So that was when I think my downfall started to happen because when I was 17, 18, I could walk in a liquor store and buy me a case. They're not gonna ask me nothing. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous,
Yeah.
right? So
I
it's
still get
like
carded. What do you mean?
walk right in there because the thing is back then I was just yep.
I just want to make sure it has a backup going here. Just in case. Right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
so I was in this dangerous kind of search for what I thought love was, the friends I thought I needed. I had access to like alcohol because I was 17, 18. I didn't get carded, and I wasn't smoking weed or anything like yet, like then, but it was really the alcohol that was really my detriment. So, a couple years go by, I'm kind of partying every night because why not? Nobody ever told me not to. Shoot, I'm going, right? And then,
Right.
I get to a point where I start doing better. So I'm doing better while I'm partying like my ass off. So this is why you can't tell me anything at this point. And this is when I get to this dangerous point. So now I'm making the money, I'm hanging out with these friends, I'm going to the bar, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like you can't tell me anything, but it's so dangerous that I don't know how to control it. And I get invited to these rooms that are important. These are elegant rooms with professionals in them. And I don't know how to act. I have no idea how to act because there's open bars, there's drinks and stuff, but the professionals
Right.
they're not drinking, they're barely sipping. I think that's even
Right.
harder over there.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting here, I got goose, mimosas, this, and that, it's just like I lost huge opportunities. I lose huge opportunities like that. So, looking back now, I know how to go about situations like that because I know looking back when I was 18, when I was 5, when I was 6, that those things will come up if I drink. If you drink, you're going to feel like this. That means you might drink even more because if you think you have that abandonment feeling and you're drinking, oh, it's going to start to swirl.
Yeah.
So
When
I
you're tying
keep,
emotions into
yep,
certain behaviors, yes,
right,
you can easily get out of control real fast. If you're just doing things to be social, that's a whole nother matter, and then you have a different mindset.
right.
So, yes, I know everyone's doing this, but I'm just hold this here and put some more orange juice or something, make a mimosa out of it. But I understand completely. There's, I had some similar parallels that I felt like that I still do feel that I wasn't prepared to go out in the world. There's a lot of things I feel even naive to this day about. As things went along, I more or less was a loner as a kid. I had a few friends here and there that would come and visit and we'd play or whatever and chat. But by the time I got to high school, I really didn't have any friends. And also just a few people when I was dabbling in the early days of cable television doing video work, and the only people who knew me was because they knew that's what I did, but I didn't really have anyone I would call a true friend at that point and all. And then
How old were you at this point? Because I know you went to the army right after
about
high
15,
school. Right?
16.
Okay.
And as time went on, everyone does this push, especially back then. There was a big push. You have to go to college. You got to go to college. Da, da, da. And of course, I decided I wanted to do television production, but there are only like a handful of places you could go. And I knew good and well my parents didn't have anywhere near the kind of money to go to those colleges. And in my mind, I knew that there was always this big push. As soon as you turn 18, you've got to leave. Which, in retrospect, that's like the silliest thing adults can do to their children. You should get them up on their feet, get them prepared for the world, help them and that also helps them save their money, so when they go out, they're not instantly struggling. you're instantly struggling.
A lot of people are instantly struggling.
Yeah.
That's definitely true.
And then that leads to some bad decisions sometimes,
Right.
just to get that money for the rent or whatever.
Right.
But so what I ended up doing, through some weird circumstances in a car accident, I ended up joining the Army. I said, well, I don't want to be a burden to my parents and all that. And I was not prepared for that either. So,
What, join the Army?
yes. But it was really weird when the first night I got down. It was Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for basic training. As soon as I walked into the barracks, I felt like I'd been there before, and I don't know why. It was the weirdest thing, and I've had a few scenes like that in my life that I've felt like I've been here before. Somehow or another, I struggled through. I did get through basic training. Okay, no failures. I couldn't do but 3 push-ups when I got there. I could do my 40 when I left. Okay,
you're sure about
run
that.
2 miles in so many minutes and 12 seconds or whatever, and then you do your pull-ups and everything like that. I couldn't do any of that when I first got there, and it seemed like everything just kind of flowed right. But that was probably the hardest part of my Army career, I would say. Then there's a second part they call AIT, Advanced Individual Training. It's basically your college courses to do what you're supposed to be doing in the Army. And it turns out mine was one of the longest, probably one of the longest ones in the Army. We were there almost 10 months in Augusta, Georgia, at Fort Gordon, Georgia. So, because almost everyone else was only there for a month or 2, maybe 3 months at the most, and we're there for 9, 10 months, they kind of treated it like it was a college thing. We had keg parties every night behind battalion headquarters.
Yeah.
So I understand the whole thing. Alcohol gets you in the wrong places.
They didn't back that to anything. Yeah.
And I barely have ever tasted beer. I think the first time I really had a couple beers was like a couple nights before the end of basic training. They took us to the USO, gave everyone 2 beers, and we took a couple pictures. For the life of me, cannot figure out what this picture went. And my mother was very disturbed by this picture that I'm holding 2 Miller Lights. And when did you start drinking?
Yeah.
Mom?
Right.
But that went on, and lots of different emotional things back and forth, because it was also one of maybe 3 job descriptions on the whole post that had women in it. So women actually lived in the same building we did. And the way it came out, they divided it by the floors for the different platoons, and they didn't have enough room for us, so they put a partition up with us and the girls, and about 12 of us were in the girls' platoon, which made real fun things happening. The first time the first sergeant came out, why are those male soldiers standing with my female soldiers? And we tried to explain, and they didn't really have a choice at the time, and they didn't have a place else to put us. And all, but that actually became a whole different dynamic of things I never even thought about up to that point. The girls always wanted us to go somewhere with them or whatever, just because we're in the same company, whatever. They weren't necessarily wanting to be romantically involved with us or anything, right. Although there were a few, but
only got one.
But yeah, there was way too much drinking going on there.
Right. So then what happens later? Because I know later on you're in Germany. I know a little bit about like you're on the Berlin Wall or near the Berlin Wall and stuff like that. Like what's going on back then, like mentally? I mean, you have to think about it sometimes.
Yeah, I think about it a lot, actually. So when I get there, and my orders came down to get there on New Year's Eve, 1983. Yeah. New Year's Eve, 1983, they put me on a train going through East Germany by myself, basically. Don't know anybody, just a couple of pieces of paper in my hands. It's an all-night train ride from Frankfurt, Germany. And you Go to sleep, train's going one way, you come back the other way. But it seemed like the Soviets knew I was going to be there before the people I was coming to see knew I was there. So that was kind of weird. The Cold War was very serious actually there. There were a couple of incidents where people were trying to escape from East Germany into West Berlin, where I lived at, and they got shot.
Oh wow!
By the Soviets and the East Germans.
Oh.
And in fact, I think it was a major or captain from my exact unit. He was killed by the Soviets while I was there. It was a little more, it wakes you up real fast. The kid thing goes away real fast when people are getting killed around you.
Yeah,
when we're supposed to be in peace, you know. So,
yeah. So how do you get out? What happens later?
Let's see. I basically said 2 years. And the thing about it, there was only a handful of us there because we had that special clearances to be there. At the place I worked at, there was other places in town that the same group, same people in the job could do, but only a handful of us were clear to go work in this one place. So I rarely actually left Berlin. I stayed there basically for the whole 2 years. I came home for like a vacation, like the Thanksgiving in '84, and came back, and things had not really changed, but you know, there was a lot of serious stuff going on at the time. This was only a few months after the Russians had shot down the Korean airliner too, and then the civilian airliner, and then the Beirut Marine barracks was bombed. All this stuff was going on around me. The Rapid Deployment Force, they actually lived in the barracks in front of us when I was in AIT. So they were gone in the middle of the night. They're like, I don't know what's going on, but something's going on. They usually don't see people running out with their guns in the middle of the night. Okay? So that you know, a lot of those experiences and some of the stuff I know about still classified to this day, it made me the most serious person you could ever imagine.
Right.
You've never seen me that serious. So it took me time when I got out to actually learn to smile and laugh again. When I actually came back and went to college over at I did Catonsville Community College because it was like one of the places that did television stuff at the time, and I felt like I was in elementary school with all these people. Everyone had the most inane thought processes I can imagine. I'm like, don't you know there's something serious going on in the world out here?
Yeah.
And also, so it took time to deprogram. And I was kind of thinking about that the other day. I was like, you know, they really don't deprogram you from the military when you get out.
Yeah,
they really should.
I heard that.
They program you to kill people. You know, when you go in, you know.
And then it's nothing
it's all about, what does the blood do? It makes the grass grow, you know, and stuff like that, you know. You know, shoot, kill, mutilate, blah blah blah, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. And the more I think about it, I said, yeah, they really should talk to us and kind of do that. I know a lot of people pretty much they kind of do, but you know, I kind of wonder sometimes is that part of why there are a lot of homeless veterans and stuff, because they have not been able to adjust.
I think so. I think they end up with the mental health issue, the PTSD, the anxiety attacks, and when people don't know how to address it, they're like, oh, they're just crazy, or they're just too much to deal with. But it's just like you never ask them what they saw or what they went through, and so it's like.
And a lot of times your friends are in the same situation, so it's kind of hard to self-diagnose with your friends too. You know, all my Army friends. My best friend was my roommate in Berlin to this day. So 40-something years later, and he doesn't live that far from here. And I actually have talked to my first sergeant, my other roommate from back then. We all wished everyone Happy New Year this year. So we the only people I've ever really stayed in touch with, because we went through something together. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah,
that brotherhood.
I mean, that makes sense.
But we understand different things. We have our own inside jokes about different things that not everyone would understand, and I think that didn't really help my different thinking processes in people understanding me sometimes, which probably drove me more into being more of a loner per se. But as a loner, I like performing for people at the same time. So if I find people who, different things, or I can identify something that bothers them, I actually drill in on them for some reason. It's my fun activity, but they're usually friends. But it's fun. And for the longest time, didn't really say I could actually say I had a hobby or anything like that to take my mind off of stuff like this and do other things. I was I'm a photographer, I want to do that, so I can't really think of anything else I want to do. But as time goes on, I was like, I gotta do something different. And I kind of stumbled into a karaoke out in Mon Jordan, of all places, one night. And that's how I started. It's like, this is kind of fun, and that became my hobby. Whenever I feel stressed or want to be around people, because I find maybe you could sulk for a day or two. But I think if you do it more than a day or two, it becomes a dangerous thing.
Right.
And I always try to, nothing else, I try to force myself to go out, be around people or people I know. And a lot of times that's one of the things we do. We go to karaoke, whatever, and then by the end of the night, you've completely let everything go. You've gotten yourself into a better position mentally and everything like that. And that's become my thing. And then I've slowly dragging myself further into music, which kind of goes back to elementary school, way back when, I guess third grade, fourth grade. That's when they rolled out the instruments in my elementary school for us to learn to play and rent and blah, blah, blah. And my mother wanted me to be the next Louis Armstrong. I didn't want to be the next Louis Armstrong. She rented and bought a trumpet for me to play as the next Louis Armstrong. I just barely did what I had to do to be in the band. I wanted to play saxophone.
Even back then?
Mm-hmm. And, as time goes on, as you see, I was like, you know what? What's stopping me from doing what I want to always try to do and find out if I can do it? So nothing. And then you go look online. You can buy these cheap instruments off of Amazon, go through all the whole thing, looking at people's reviews and reading between the lines. That's another thing, learning to do, reading between the lines on either reviews or documentation for new equipment. As a consultant, where I had to specify equipment to people, and I had to learn how to read between the lines on some of this paperwork people give you.
Yeah.
So, can it really do what they say it does,
Right.
Quite often I'm right. Not always, but 99.8% of the time I think I'm right on that. I just found that as time goes on, I'm like, there's really no reason for me not to at least have a little fun, or at least try to do something I always felt a calling for. Every time I hear certain music, because I'm sorry to say, back in the 80s, we had the best music. This generation, y'all don't have nothing on what we had, okay? So there's a lot of saxophone stuff in movies and music and whatever. Some of the best bands that people still sample to this day, that was all 80s music. So every time I hear certain songs, I'm like, I really wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. And one day I just said, no, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm coming along. I don't have as much time to practice as I thought I would, but I think I can do reasonable. But I'm never happy with where I'm at. So I'm always pushing myself to do better. And maybe later this year I'll do some public stuff. We'll see.
Yeah. You said a lot of things there, a lot of good things. That the good things I take away from what you just said is, I don't know if you realize what you're saying, like the impact that the shift from having to be so serious and militant, coming out and getting adjusted to society again, you still had that brotherhood with the people you went through that situation with, which is key. Because, I wasn't in college, but people that go to college, they have, sorority sisters and fraternity brothers. Like they have that brotherhood, that sisterhood, which is, I think, the definite key. Because I feel like it's deeper than just a friendship, a surface level friendship. And then the second thing you said is the decompressing. So the karaoke was decompressing, which was another great thing, because I feel like as a man, we had to take on emotions like this big and then put them this big and then feed it to everybody in pieces. Right. That's what I feel like.
Right.
So it's like, then you found a way to challenge yourself. So when you do something for yourself, that kind of combats you having to just provide for everybody else all the time. So doing the thing for yourself was the saxophone, that challenge. The decompressing was the karaoke, the letting loose, the nerves can relax. And that brotherhood, that third piece, is also really pivotal, because when I ask some people these questions, they don't have a brotherhood. They don't have hobbies. So I don't want you to take those things lightly, because not everybody has those. So those people that you have that are solid.
And that's more recent too. I mean, I really, well, the saxophone thing's only a year old, but the karaoke thing, maybe 15, 20 years. But up until then, I didn't have nothing to go do or outside of work, and that's all I would do, was go to work. And it kind of became, I became a night owl, because the good work was being done in the evening shifts a lot of times at the TV stations. And when I worked at TV stations, BET, doing news and some other places I worked at, all the good stuff where they see you to get promotions, that's a lot of how I ended up working in the evening. And at the same time, I was also looking at, my wife and I, we were looking at, one of us needs to be around for the kids when they're in school or whatever, somewhere nearby. And that was the other reason I worked in the evening. His mother was going to school to be a nurse or whatever. And I was like, well, I got to be around, get the kids off the bus or whatever. And then I'd do the evening thing and come back and whatever. And we'd start over the next day, So, and that's one of the reasons I was home on 9/11, that I was the day parent that day. Right. And I heard him talking about it, but I don't really try to do super emotional things in front of the kids, as they say, because my parents never did either. I realized how much they were hiding from me years later.
I believe that.
And they may or may not know they were doing it at the time.
They may have thought that was best, but I think the veil over the kids' eyes too long could be, that balance is tough. I know that balance is tough.
Yeah, I mean, it was more probably the racist stuff. They were trying to keep it away from me. Just because I grew up in the 60s, it was only all the laws on discrimination and desegregation were just getting passed when I was born. So there were a couple places we used to go to where we would stop when we were traveling to my grandparents, and they would stop for food, this one place, but we would never go inside. And it didn't occur to me till later, they probably wouldn't let us inside.
Yeah.
Or use the bathrooms, because we couldn't use the bathrooms in this place either. Little stuff like that. And when we moved to Maryland eventually, I was the only black child in 2 schools. That was a little rough. But the interesting thing was, most of the problem was the teachers or other parents. Me and the little white kids, we had fun together.
Right. I mean, because kids weren't,
but for 90% of the time, everything was cool with the kids.
But it's learned. It has to be learned from parents, because if you didn't know that people were racist, then they learned to be racist from the same people.
Yep.
From their parents. So
exactly.
It's tough.
It's definitely learned. So I personally desegregated 2 schools, and almost a third. I think there was 3 other kids in the next school I was in before we moved. Yeah, and that probably plays into why I was kind of a loner too. That I probably was like 10 or 11 before I was actually around people halfway could trust.
Right.
Home. So, but I like I said, I don't necessarily hold anything against any people I grew up with per se.
Right.
Like you said, it was learned. That was the way of the world before that. People resisted change and everything like that. And I probably have the biggest mix of friends you could ever imagine, from all races, all countries, and anywhere in the world, because we don't look at it that way. When we talk to each other, we talk to each other as people, and that's the way it should always be.
That's why it should be.
And occasionally we'll do some off-color jokes about race, but we all know why we're doing it, because we fun.
Yeah, it's all.
We grew up with Red Fox on TV.
You're right.
Archie Bunker, the Jeffersons, Good Times. If you go look at some of those old videos on YouTube, they were throwing the
It was different. Yeah, they let it fly. Let it fly back then.
So we, like I said, there's a lot of memes going around that this is why people of this generation are not soft. We did a lot of this stuff and saw it for.
Right.
Yeah, and we knew there were certain places you shouldn't go by yourself, in certain places, but didn't really have any problems per se, I would say. I actually found most of my white friends were more sensitive about stuff than I was.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, I thought. I remember when we were down in Georgia, they had this one bus to take us to town or whatever, but it was one of those old General Motors buses that you always see in all those movies about the 60s and 50s and busing and all that stuff. And she swore, I never saw it. She swore she could see they had painted over blacks in the back and whites in the front on somewhere on the bus. I couldn't see it, but she was so upset. So I was like, okay. That's the way it was. We are in Georgia.
Yeah. Georgia's has some tough spots.
So, and I appreciate that, and a lot of my friends, we've gotten into situations, not with each other, but where may or may not have misheard somebody saying something. Me and my best friend Steve probably gotten close to getting about 2 bar fights because he thought someone called me nigger. Right. And my friend is white. So, yeah. And of course, he's my friend, so I got to back him up, so we're both going to jail.
You're both in it. Yeah, you're both in it.
So, I'd be prepared to break some furniture.
I mean, even with solid friends, like, I hate when I'm in a situation like that. It's like, we can't find everybody. Everybody backs into a corner or tucks their tail. Like, I'm gonna have a friend that's just like, all right, chill. All right, let's get out of here. Yeah. Then I can't find you. Yeah, where'd everybody go?
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot more of that now than what you just described, and it's it's sad. It's sad.
It is. I think, like I said, I guess it's part of that brotherhood of the military too.
Right.
I would probably consider maybe 1, maybe 2 other people who were not in the military with me that I would consider friends, but they're not as tight as my other military friends. So, but they were there for situations where I needed help, and that kind of brought them into that circle. So I probably got a circle of 3 friends, or maybe 4. But
sounds about right.
I can rely on them.
That sounds about right. When you get that genuine group, it's probably 3 or 4, honestly.
Yeah.
All right. And so just coming to a close here. How do young men move forward? How do young men become better leaders? Like, what do we do to bridge the gap between disconnect of over masculinity, maybe?
I don't know if it's necessarily that. I think the way the political world has grabbed a hold of all these different terms, and a lot of times they seem to reverse the meanings of words, and I think that's a big problem too, that people are being told they need to do this to be more compatible with, say, the women, not to be so manly or masculine, but you're doing what they want, but they still don't like it, because then they find that they don't like men who are not masculine, but they won't admit it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole dating scene's completely upside down.
Upside down.
And backwards, and no one wants to go out anymore. Or people have unrealistic demands when they go on dates. Oh, you got to buy me this, that, and the other thing to go out with me for 20 minutes. I'm like,
yeah,
that sounds like something else in the Bible.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably going to take a little time for all this to kind of sort itself out. I think, things go in cycles. If you study history, and I've kind of become a amateur historian to some degree. Everything runs in cycles, and eventually it's going to come back around to masculinity is going to be a thing, femininity is going to be a thing, the balance is going to come back.
Right.
I think it's probably going to be 5 to 10 years before we really feel that balance coming back. Because at the same time, as people are separating themselves, they're also taking themselves off the market for having children later on and then sometimes they realize it was too late,
right.
They can't, or they've gotten to a point where no one wants to be with them because one of the things when you get older, you get set in your ways. A lot of times I try to be flexible, but I know I'm set in my ways. I'm a pure Virgo. Okay. So that makes it harder for people to break through your barrier sometimes because you've gotten set in your ways.
Right.
And I'm not sure there's anything I could specifically say that would make it better right now. I think it's just something the time's going to have to fix. And hopefully that people can see that some of the things they're doing are not in the best interest of themselves or anyone else. And that it can, and I think that comes down with age and wisdom, that wisdom comes from getting yourself in trouble and learning from it, so that's basically where it comes from. I think Dean Martin has some meme like that, and
yeah, I knew to post that today.
Yeah, and there was another meme about looking at God's plan for you, and the guy was flipping through the book going, why, and he gets to the next page, oh, that's why. So, these things are not always revealed to you why and how you should do it until you actually see it sometimes.
Right there. I mean, that's right there it comes from. Yeah. All right. And then, so what do you think, or do you think of anything that kind of like your generation can do for the younger generation to connect, like whether it's Zoom meetings with that younger generation, or it's going out and having dinner with them? Like if I had a men's group and I was trying to get men together of all ages to support them, do you think that's something that makes sense? Like
maybe for some people, but I think it comes down to a personality thing. When I go out to sing and whatever, it's usually all ages.
Right.
Most people tend to be younger than me. I'm technically a baby boomer. I'm technically a baby boomer. So we look at things a little different than everyone else, and maybe not quite as hard as my parents did, but there's a little difference there in how we approach things. And I know a lot of people get in these groups, and you really got to know who's really running these things and what their motivations are.
Yeah,
I've become a little more suspicious of some of these gatherings. Sometimes are they just
like communities? Like, what do you mean? Like online communities? What do you mean?
Online communities and sometimes the in-person stuff. I mean, it's kind of changed a little bit, since the Zoom thing has become a big thing now. Right. What are their motivations sometimes? Because sometimes it's just to get more information out of you about something or your money or whatever, and they're not necessarily there to help you. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just becoming
that wall up.
But I think when the opportunities present themselves, that the offer can be there. But I think a lot of times I'm finding is a lot of younger people are looking at us as trying to be their parents, and we're not. We're just offering it friendly advice. Because, I mean, I got a lot of friendly advice from a lot of older people when I was a teenager.
Right.
And it's played out very well.
Right.
I think I had a moment where I was like, well, what am I going to learn from this or whatever? And then it's like, if you listen, you can learn.
Right.
And that's what, and something along that thought process was what he was trying to get across to me. And I was like, and the more I think about it, yeah, you do learn a lot if you shut up.